Israel, but I think it'll be harder in the future to be a friend to Israel if we're out of money and if we're bankrupt. If we destroy our own country, it'll be a little bit harder to be a friend to Israel if we destroy our country in the process. The situation is fairly dire, and I'm one of those who believe that there will be significant repercussions to running massive deficits. In our country, we're running an annualized deficit of $1 trillion a year. We owe $16 trillion total. We owe more money per capita than they do in Greece. Now you would say, well, we're not Greece. We aren't Greece. We probably have the greatest productivity per capita in the world, and we can absorb more debt than Greece can, but there are repercussions to where we're headed. And that has somewhat to do with, how much money we have to dispense to others. If we're giving money out of our savings, that's one thing, but if you're giving money where you have to borrow it from one country to give it to another country, you have to wonder at how wise that policy is. There also are repercussions, as Corinne said. There are repercussions to this. I'm quite concerned that some of the weaponry that we're currently giving to Egypt may well someday be used against Israel. We're giving the most advanced fighters that are made in the world, the F-16, to Israel currently. We're also giving tanks to Egypt. We're also giving tanks to Egypt as well. And this comes a month after President Morsi is seen in a prayer meeting with their spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who's saying, we want to destroy Israel and all of her friends. So I'm, for one, am quite concerned about giving the most advanced weaponry in the world to people who I don't think we can be certain are not going to be enemies of Israel. There are also some other questions as far as whether or not our aid hampers Israel to make its own decisions in its best, as Israel sees best, whether or not our money sometimes clouds the sovereignty of Israel. People are always asking, what should Israel do about these settlements? What should Israel do about Gaza? What should Israel do about Iran? While America should and does have an opinion in these things, ultimately we don't live here, in the sense that I don't think we can quite experience what it's like to live. If you live 20 miles or 5 miles inland from Gaza, what it's like to have missiles raining down on you. Ultimately, the decisions that you have to make, I don't think you need to call me on the phone and get permission for what you want to do to stop missiles from raining down on you from Gaza. And I think in some ways, the foreign aid has made it such that people in Israel many think, they've got to call America and ask for permission to defend themselves. And so I think it is something that treads on Israeli sovereignty for us to have this relationship. But ultimately, I think even the Prime Minister said in '96 when he came to our country that ultimately he'd like to see Israel independent of foreign aid as well. As far as gradualism, I'm all for gradualism. I'd go ahead and start a little more quickly with those who are enemies of Israel and enemies of the United States, and I'd like to see their aid ended much quicker. And with regard to Israel, could be a gradual phenomenon. It doesn't mean that we disengage from Israel. Not having foreign aid doesn't mean that we wouldn't trade, that we wouldn't have sale of armaments when Israel wants to buy armaments, when we wouldn't have things that we share together. It just means that it wouldn't be a one-way street where it isn't a sale versus a grant. I think we need to be concerned about this. The other thing I would say that I'm excited about the Jerusalem Institute is that there are two different ways you try to affect change. And one way you try to affect change is through education, intellectual enlightenment, and then there's politics. Politics is much more crass and not always as effective, but it's much quicker. The Jerusalem Institute is a long road to try to change people's opinions. Sometimes hard to have an unpopular opinion, but I think it's important not only that we talk about things like aid, but we talk about an economic system. What has, I think, made our country one of the greatest nations and greatest civilizations on earth is our economic system. It's a belief in free exchange, voluntary exchange. It's a belief in capitalism. And despite all the bad things that I think government tries to do or the obstacles they try to put in the way, capitalism is an amazing economic system. And if we can embrace more of that and have more trade, have more interactions between nations, I think we're less likely to have war as well. But I'm a big fan. I'm a participate with some of the think tanks in our country. Green mentioned Cato. We participate with Cato and Heritage and other think tanks in Washington. As well, in the United States, we have think tanks in each of the different states. I'm a big fan of Milton Friedman, and one of the statements that he made that I like to repeat, because I think it's an important and very simple but very succinct statement, is that nobody spends someone else's money as wisely as you spend your own. And this is basically the argument for limited government. It's an argument of efficiency, and it's not that you'll have no government, but it's why you want to minimize how big government is. It's because government doesn't do things very wisely. If it's your money, you spend it wisely. If you have $100, you say, this is how much I have for this week and I'm going to spend it wisely. To a government, it's $1 trillion and we'll just print more if we run out. And so government doesn't spend things wisely. So there's an efficiency reason why government should be minimized. And then there's also the liberty argument, that for every ounce of government you get, you give up an ounce of your freedom. That doesn't mean we have no government. You've got to have government. Obviously, you have to have an army to defend Israel. The United States has to have an army. We have to have a judicial system. We have to have property rights. There is a certain amount of government we need. But we minimize that because the more government we get, which means the more taxes we pay, the more we give up of our freedom. I often say that it isn't that government is stupid, although it's a debatable question. It's just that they don't get the right signals. If you're in business, you have to meet a payroll, you have to make wise decisions week by week by week, and it makes you efficient. And it isn't because someone likes you that you're successful in business. You're successful in business because you sell something that other people buy, and you're forced to every day to succeed. And 9 out of 10 small businesses fail, but it's that rugged competition that ultimately distributes goods, the most amount of goods to the most amount of people. And it's important that we be proud of that and extol that, because if we lose that, then we allow government to grow bigger and bigger and our freedoms to grow smaller and smaller, and ultimately not to be able to thrive. Particularly in Israel's case, I think with a country that has so many obstacles and so many enemies, you need to be embracing capitalism to a great extent. And I've read some good stories. The Startup Nation is a book that I've read that talks about some of the businesses that have started here. And I think there are some success stories here with trying to, we have companies that come to us in our office in Washington and say, oh, I can't get a license to start my medical device company in the United States, but I've got one in Israel. So there are some good things going on here, but you do need more of them. And I think understanding that the engine of capitalism is ultimately what defeated socialism and what defeated communism is an important one. But thank you for having me today, and thank you for coming out.